I never thought I'd live to see the day my ex-fiancée walked down the aisle in another man's arms. Yet there I was, hiding behind a row of marble pillars in a grand cathedral in Florence, pretending to be just another guest. My heart was pounding so hard I thought someone might hear it. I wasn't there to cause trouble. I wasn't there to win her back. I was there to find out one thing: was she truly happy, or was it all a performance? The woman standing at the altar used to be my entire world. Sophia, we were supposed to be the ones getting married 2 years ago, but she left me suddenly, without warning, without closure. One morning she was sipping coffee in my kitchen, laughing about the future, and by nightfall, she was going with nothing but a note that said, "You'll understand one day." I never did. Maybe that's why I couldn't let it go. Maybe that's why, when I saw the announcement of her wedding in the paper, I booked the next flight. Everyone called me crazy. A billionaire sitting in the shadows of his ex's wedding like some ghost from the past. It sounded pathetic. But money doesn't fix a broken heart. It only hides it behind luxury. I had to see her face. I had to know if the smile she wore was real, or if her eyes still carried that same sadness I saw the night she left me. The church was filled with laughter, with expensive perfume and soft whispers of love. Sophia looked radiant in white, her golden hair flowing beneath her veil. The man beside her, Marcos, was the son of a powerful Greek businessman. I'd read enough about him to know he was more of a deal than a destiny. I watched as she held his hand, but something inside me tightened. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. When the priest began the vows, I noticed her hands tremble slightly. My gut twisted. This wasn't joy, it was something else. Maybe fear. Maybe regret. And as she said "I do," I caught a small tear sliding down her cheek. Everyone thought it was emotion, but I knew that tear. I'd seen it before, the day she walked away from me. And at that moment, I realized that this wedding wasn't a celebration. It was a secret screaming for help. Asterisk, I stayed seated through the ceremony. Every muscle in my body locked tight as if I were made of stone. People around me clapped, cheered, threw flower petals, and yet all I could see was Sophia's trembling hand in his. The sound of the church bells rang in my ears like a warning. As they walked down the aisle together, she glanced up for a brief second, and that's when our eyes met. It was quick, just a flicker, but it felt like time froze. Her lips parted slightly in shock, her steps faltered for half a second, and then she forced a smile. Turning away as though she hadn't seen me at all, that moment burned through me. Did she recognize me instantly? Was she pretending for his sake? Or was she angry that I'd come? When the newlyweds exited the church, I followed at a distance. No one recognized me under the dark sunglasses and the simple black suit. I didn't look like the man who owned half of Europe's hotels. I looked like a ghost haunting his own past. Outside, the photographers were shouting their names, and Sophia held onto Marco's arm like it was the only thing keeping her standing. I saw her fake another smile as the cameras flashed. Something inside me snapped. This wasn't happiness. This was survival. After they left for the reception, I decided to go there too quietly, unnoticed. I had an invitation, of course. One of my business associates was on the guest list, and it hadn't been hard to get in. The venue was a palace overlooking the Arno River, decorated in gold and white. Laughter echoed from every corner, but the moment I stepped inside, I could feel its tension beneath the glamour. Sophia's laughter was hollow. Her eyes darted around the room, searching until they found me again across the hall. This time, she didn't look away. Her gaze lingered, filled with questions, fear, and something else may have hope. I lifted my glass slightly, a silent acknowledgement, and saw her chest rise as if she'd been holding her breath for too long. Marcos turned to her, whispering something, and her smile instantly froze. I knew then I wasn't just imagining it. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Asterisk, I slipped outside to the terrace, needing air, needing space to think. The night was warm, the city lights painting the river in gold and silver streaks. I leaned against the railing, trying to steady my heartbeat, when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned, and there she was, Sophia. She stood a few feet away, her wedding dress glowing under the moonlight, her veil fluttering in the breeze. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. It was as if the world had gone silent, leaving just the two of us suspended in a memory. Then she said softly, "You shouldn't have come." Her voice trembled, carrying the same mix of fear and sadness I'd heard 2 years ago. "Maybe not," I replied, my voice low. But I had to see for myself. As she looked away, her fingers twisting the edge of her veil. "You think I'm happy?" she whispered bitterly. "You think I married him for love?" My chest tightened. "I don't know what to think anymore, Sophia. You've disappeared from my life without a word. You left me with nothing but a note. Tell me, was any of it real?" Her eyes filled with tears. "It was real," she said, almost choking on the words. "Every moment with you was real. But I didn't have a choice. I took a step closer, anger and confusion swirling in me. No choice? You always had a choice. You could have told me the truth." She shook her head violently. "No, I couldn't. If I had, you'd be in danger." Her voice cracked, and she looked over her shoulder nervously, as if afraid someone might be listening. That reaction hit me like a punch. Danger? What was she talking about? Before I could ask, the terrace doors opened, and Marcos appeared, his expression dark and suspicious. "There you are," he said, his voice smooth but cold. His eyes flicked to me, narrowing slightly. "And you are?" I smiled faintly. "An old friend." He smirked. "Then this is not the time for nostalgia." Sophia lowered her gaze instantly, her body tensing under his stare. The way he looked at Herat wasn't love. It was ownership. As he took her hand and led her back inside, she looked at me one last time, her eyes silently begging for help. And that's when I knew I couldn't just walk away. Asterisk, I spent the rest of the evening pretending to be just another nameless guest. But my mind was spinning like a storm. Every look, every whisper, every fake smile from Sophia replayed in my head like a warning I couldn't ignore. I watched Marcos closely now's way he never left her side, how his hand gripped her arm a little too tightly when someone else spoke to her, how his charming laughter vanished the second her back was turned. Something about him screamed control, not love. I had met men like him before, men who smiled in public and ruled their homes like kingdoms of fear. The more I observed, the clearer it became. Sophia wasn't free. She was trapped in a gilded cage, and tonight's wedding was just the ribbon sealing it shut. When the music started, couples filled the dance floor, and Marcos led her to the center. I couldn't take my eyes off them. She moved gracefully, but her smile was fixed, her eyes lifeless. I clenched my fists under the table. The man who claimed her hand now had broken something sacred. I couldn't sit still anymore. I needed answers. I left the hall quietly, walking through the empty corridors of the mansion, hoping to find a moment alone to think. That's when I heard voices and hissing from a small side room. I froze by the door, my chest tight. "You promised me," Sophia's voice trembled. "You said once we married, you'd leave my family alone." Marcos laughed, low and cruel. "And I will. As long as you behave." There was the sharp sound of glass breaking, and I felt my blood turn to ice. "You're mine now, Sophia. Don't forget that," he hissed. I couldn't stand it any longer. My hand was already on the doorknob when footsteps echoed down the hall, forcing me to step back into the shadows. 2 bodyguards appeared, standing like statues near the door. I couldn't help her now, not without blowing my cover. But as I turned away, I swore silently to myself. I didn't come here to stir old wounds, but fate had dragged me back into her life for a reason. If she was in danger, then this wasn't over. Not until she was safe. Asterisk. That night, after the wedding ended and the last guests stumbled out with wine-soaked laughter, I stayed behind, hidden in the shadows near the parking area. The staff were cleaning up, the music had faded, and the mansion stood quiet under the moonlight. I watched from a distance as Sophia and Marcos walked toward a sleek black limousine. She looked exhausted, like someone who had spent all her strength pretending. When Marcos turned to speak with the driver, she glanced around, her eyes scanning the darkness until they found me. It was only a few seconds, but she gave the smallest nod, almost imperceptible, like she wanted me to follow. My heart pounded. I got in my car and drove behind them, keeping enough distance so they wouldn't notice. The The road wound up a hill overlooking the city, ending at a villa surrounded by tall iron gates. I watched as they entered, and the gates closed with a cold metallic echo. I waited there for nearly an hour, staring at the lights in the upper windows. Then, out of nowhere, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "If you still care, meet me tomorrow at noon. The Old Cafe by Ponte Vecchio. Come alone." My chest tightened. It had to be her. I barely slept that night. My mind kept replaying her words. "If I told you, you'd be in danger." What could possibly threaten her in my world, where money solved almost everything? The next day I arrived early. The cafe was quiet, overlooking the river, the same place where we'd had our first date years ago. The smell of coffee and rain filled the air, and every second felt like an eternity. Then she appeared, dressed in a simple coat and sunglasses, her face pale but determined. She sat across from me, her hands trembling as she removed her glasses. "You shouldn't have followed me," she said softly, her voice hoarse. "But I'm glad you did." I leaned forward, trying to read her expression. "Tell me the truth, Sophia. What's going on?" She looked around nervously before whispering. "Marcos isn't who you think he is. He's dangerous. And I married him because he left me no choice." Asterisk, my breath caught in my throat as her words sank in. "What do you mean, no choice?" I asked, leaning closer, my voice barely a whisper. Her eyes darted to the window before she spoke again, each word trembling with fear. "2 years ago, after I left you, my father made a deal with Marcos's company. He was drowning in debt, and Marcos offered to bail him out. But it wasn't just business. He wanted me. He said if I didn't agree to marry him, he'd destroy my father, take everything, even have him arrested for falsified contracts. I tried to run, but he found me. He made sure I had nowhere to go." My chest burned with anger. "And you thought leaving me would protect me?" She nodded, tears welling up. "You don't know what he's capable of. When he found out I had been with you, he said, if I ever contacted you again, he'd come after you too. So I disappeared. It was the only way I could keep you safe." I gripped the edge of the table, my knuckles turning white. "Sophia, you could have told me. I could have helped you." She shook her head. "You don't understand. Money means nothing to him. Power does. He has people everywhere, police, lawyers, even politicians. You can't fight him the usual way." I could see the terror in her eyes, but beneath it, there was still a flicker of strength. "Then why contact me now?" I asked quietly. She hesitated, her voice dropping lower. "Because I found something. Proof of everything Gilligal trades. Offshore accounts, blackmail. If it ever goes public, he'll be finished. But I can't keep it. If he finds out I have it, he'll kill me." I leaned forward, my pulse racing. "Where is it?" She glanced at her purse and whispered, "Hidden. Not here. I'll tell you where, but you have to promise to stay away from me after this. If he suspects we met, he'll come for both of us." My mind was spinning, torn between rage and protectiveness. "I'm not leaving you to face him alone," I said firmly. She looked at me, her eyes full of both love and despair. "Then you'll die trying to save me," she whispered. "And I can't lose you again." Asterisk, her words hung in the air like smoke, thick and suffocating. I wanted to tell her I wasn't afraid, that I'd burn down Marcos's entire empire if I had to, but something in her trembling voice stopped me. She wasn't exaggerating, she was warning me. I reached across the table and took her hand, feeling it cold and fragile in mine. "Sophia, you don't have to fight this alone. I've dealt with men like him before." She shook her head, her grip tightening. "No, you haven't. You don't understand the kind of man he is. He's done things you can't imagine." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Promise me you'll be careful." I wanted to promise, but my silence said more than words ever could. Before I could respond, she suddenly tensed. Her gaze fixed on something Gorsuman behind me. I turned slightly and saw a man in a dark suit standing by the entrance, pretending to read a newspaper. But I recognized the look. I'd hired men like him, on-sea guards, watchers, shadows. "He's one of Marcos's men," she whispered urgently. "He must have followed me." My heart pounded. "Then we leave. Now." I stood and guided her toward the back exit, slipping through the narrow alley behind the cafe. The city noises drowned the sound of our hurried steps, but every echo made my pulse quicken. We reached a quiet street and she stopped, breathing heavily. "I can't go with you," she said suddenly. "If he finds us together, it'll make things worse." "You think I'm just going to walk away now?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. She looked at me with a mixture of love and fear. "There's a safe deposit box at Banca Fiorenza," she said quickly. "Under the name Lucia Verdi. That's where the proof is. Take it, use it, but don't come back for me." Before I could stop her, she pressed a folded piece of paper into my hand and stepped back. "Go," she whispered urgently, her eyes filling with tears. I hesitated, torn between logic and emotion, but the sound of approaching footsteps made the decision for me. I turned and ran. When I looked back one last time, she was gone, swallowed by the shadows of the alley. Like she'd never been there at all. I didn't stop running until I reached my car. My hands shook as I fumbled for the keys, my heart still racing from the adrenaline. When I finally started the engine, I sat there for a moment, staring at the folded piece of paper Sophia had given me. My name was written on it, in her familiar, delicate handwriting. I opened it slowly, and inside was nothing more than a series of numbers and letters, an account code, and a passphrase. Banca Fiorenza. Safe deposit box. Proof. I knew what I had to do. The next morning, I went to the bank, dressed inconspicuously, hat low, collar turned up. The clerk led me into a private room and handed me a small metal box. My palms were sweaty as I opened it. Inside were a few flash drives, a stack of documents, and a photograph Sophia standing beside Marcos, smiling for the camera, while in the reflection of the mirror behind them, his hand was gripping her wrist hard enough to bruise. My chest tightened. Beneath the photograph was a USB labeled Athena. I plugged it into my laptop, and what I saw made my blood run cold. Financial records, money laundering routes, offshore transfers under fake identities, and evidence of extortion involving multiple officials across Europe. Marcos wasn't just powerful, was untouchable, but this was enough to ruin him. Maybe even imprison him for life. As I scrolled through the files, one folder caught my eye. It was titled Leverage Sophia. I hesitated before opening it, and when I did, my stomach dropped. Dozens of pictures of her, taken without her knowledge, her phone records, her family's financial statement, everything about her life cataloged like a criminal case. He'd been tracking her for years, even before he proposed. This wasn't love, it was obsession. Rage burned through me. I slammed the laptop shut and leaned back, trying to breathe. I could expose him, but if I did, he'd know exactly where the evidence came from. And Sophia would pay the price first. My phone buzzed suddenly, snapping me out of my thoughts. No name. Just a message that read, "You shouldn't have opened it." My heart stopped. Someone knew. And that meant the clock had already started ticking. For a few seconds, I just stared at the message, my pulse thundering in my ears. Then another text appeared this time, a photo. It was Sophia, sitting in the back seat of a car, her face pale, eyes wide with fear. The caption beneath it read, "If you want her alive, return what you took." My blood ran cold. I looked around the small bank room, my instincts screaming that I was being watched. Without thinking, I gathered the documents and the flash drives, shoved them back into the box, and left through the side door. I could feel eyes on me, even in the crowd. I drove out of Florence, heading toward the hills where my private villa stood hidden among cypress trees. Every mile felt heavier than the last. When I finally reached it, I locked every door and window before spreading the contents of the box on the table. I had to option hand everything over and lose Sophia forever, or use it to destroy Marcos and risk losing her in the process. There was no safe choice, only consequences. I poured myself a drink, trying to think clearly, when another message arrived. This time, it was a voice note. I hesitated, then played it. Sophia's voice came through, trembling but alive. "Don't come for me," she said. "Please, he'll kill you. Just forget me." Her words broke halfway through, and I heard a man's voice in the background. sharp and commanding before the recording cut off. I felt something inside me snap. I'd already lost her once. I wasn't going to lose her again like this. I called an old contact, a man named Victor, who used to handle my private security. He owed me a few favors. I need eyes on Marcos's villa, I told him, discreetly. There was silence on the line for a moment before he said, "You're going to war with a monster, my friend. Are you ready for that?" I stared at the photo of Sophia on my screen and said, "I've been ready since the day she walked away." That night, as the wind howled outside, I loaded the evidence onto multiple drives, creating backups. If anything happened to me, I'd make sure the world would know the truth. This time, I wasn't the man she left behind. I was the man coming to finish it. Asterisk. That night, I drove to Marcos's villa with Victor's team trailing like shadows. We watched the place until the guards made their rounds and the moon hid behind clouds. I felt every memory of Sophia fused with the present love turning into mission. We slipped through a side entrance Victor's men had found, moving quietly over gravel and clipped hedges. Inside the house, the air was cool and smelled of cologne. I heard a stifled sob behind a closed door and my pulse punched at my throat. Victor signaled and 2 men took positions while I forced the lock. It opened with a whisper, and there she was, bruised and exhausted, but still the same. When she saw me, her whole body collapsed with relief, and she reached for me as if I were solid ground. I lifted her and felt the moment settle. I had come to finish what fate began. We didn't leave at once. We needed a way to bring Marcos down without exposing Sophia further. Victor had planted copies of the evidence in places that would be found when probes began. We moved through the villa, leaving subtle trail Sanimus emails, planted files, a tip to a trusted journalist. By dawn, the world shifted. News alerts exploded on my phone. Raids hit his properties, armored teams moved in, and Marcos's control faltered. I watched the feed with Sophia beside me, her head on my shoulder, and felt a calm I had not known in years. She cried then, but these were different tears, relief, and the first stirrings of hope. Marcos was arrested within 48 hours. His men scattered, and the investigations revealed laundering, bribery, and coercion. The evidence Sophia risked became the backbone of the case. The press called it a fall from power. I called it justice. Sophia rebuilt slowly. Her father's business recovered, and she began to choose for herself again. We spoke sometimes after that short messages, guarded visits never, the fire of our old life, but a steadier warmth. I learned that rescuing someone does not bind them to you. It frees them to decide. In the end, I did not win her back. I won something quieter. The knowledge that I used my resources to right a wrong. Walking away was not defeat. It was respect. On nights when the river glints like silver, I think of that wedding gand. I know I did the right thing.